My name is Diana Chen. I am 45 years old, the CEO of Chen Digital Solutions, former software engineer. The smell of fresh coffee and nervous sweat filled the conference room as I watched candidate number 7 walk through the door for his interview. He was older than the others, maybe 50, with graying hair and a cheap suit that had seen better days. He kept his head down as he approached the table, clutching a worn leather portfolio like it was a lifeline. When he finally looked up and saw me sitting at the head of the interview panel, his face went white as paper. "Hello, Marcus," I said quietly. "It's been a long time." Marcus Hoffman, my former best friend, my former business partner, the man who'd stolen my half of our software company 15 years ago with a forged contract and a smile on his face. The same man who'd told me that women weren't cut out for the tech industry and that I should be grateful. He was willing to buy out my share for pennies on the dollar. The irony of seeing him here, in my boardroom, applying for a job at the company I'd built from nothing, was almost too perfect to be real. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. The other interviewers, my VP of Engineering, Sarah Martinez, and Head of HR, Mike Thompson, looked between us with confusion. They had no idea they were witnessing the reunion I'd been planning for over a decade. Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "Diana?" Marcus's voice cracked like a teenager's. I didn't know you worked here." "I don't work here," I said, leaning back in my leather chair and letting the words hang in the air for a moment. "I own here. This is my company, Marcus, Chen Digital Solutions. Maybe you've heard of us." The color drained completely from his face. Of course he'd heard of us. We were the biggest software development firm on the West Coast, worth over $200 million. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and tech startups that had become household names. The same company that had grown from the code Marcus and I had written together in my tiny garage apartment 20 years ago when we were both broke college graduates with big dreams and bigger appetites for ramen noodles. I watched him process this information, seeing the exact moment when he realized that the Diana C., listed as CEO on our website, was the same Diana Chen he'd screwed over 15 years ago. The same woman he'd told would never make it in Silicon Valley because she was too emotional and didn't understand how business really works. "Please," Marcus whispered, his hands trembling as he gripped his portfolio tighter. "Can we talk privately?" I glanced at my colleagues, both of whom were staring at us with barely concealed curiosity. Sarah had worked for me for 8 years and had never seen me lose my composure. Mike had been with the company since the beginning and knew bits and pieces of my history, but not the full story of how I'd ended up starting Chen Digital Solutions alone instead of as part of the partnership that had originally been planned. "Sarah, Mike, could you give us a moment?" I asked, my voice steady and professional despite the earthquake happening in my chest. They exchanged glances, but stood up without question. "We'll be in my office when you're ready to continue," Sarah said, shooting me a look that clearly meant call if you need backup. After they left, Marcus and I sat in silence, the weight of 15 years hanging between us like a wall made of broken promises and shattered trust. The conference room suddenly felt too small, too warm, despite the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city skyline. I could see the building where our original company had been located, now dwarfed by newer skyscrapers that had risen during the tech boom I'd helped fuel. Marcus looked older than his 50 years, with deep lines around his eyes and hands that shook slightly as he set down his portfolio on the polished mahogany table. His suit was off the rack, probably from a department store, a far cry from the custom-tailored clothes he'd worn when he was riding high on the success of selling our company. His wedding ring was gone, I noticed, leaving a pale band of skin on his finger. "You look good, Diana," Success suits you. Cut the small talk, Marcus. What are you doing here? He opened his portfolio with careful, deliberate movements, like he was handling something fragile. Inside was a resume that was painfully thin, with gaps in employment that told a story of professional decline. I need a job. I've been out of work for 8 months, and no one in the industry will hire me. Gee, I wonder why. I picked up his resume, scanning the progression from CTO positions at promising startups to senior developer roles at smaller companies to consulting gigs that lasted only a few months. The trajectory was clear. A man whose reputation had preceded him, and not in a good way. What happened to Hoffman Technologies? Last I heard, you were doing pretty well for yourself. That had been about 5 years ago, when I'd seen an article in TechCrunch about his latest venture. I'd read it with the kind of morbid curiosity that makes you slow down to look at car accidents, wondering if he'd finally gotten the comeuppance he deserved. Marcus's jaw tightened, and I saw a flash of the old arrogance that had made him think he could steal my life's work and get away with it. You know what happened? You made sure of it. I made sure of it. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. The sound echoed off the glass walls of the conference room, sharp and bitter. Marcus, I haven't thought about you in years. I've been too busy building the company you tried to steal from me. You blacklisted me, he said, his voice rising with the desperation of a man who'd been carrying this theory around for years, polishing it like a worry stone. Every time I got close to landing a major contract, somehow my potential clients would hear stories about my questionable business practices. Every time I tried to raise funding, investors would suddenly lose interest after doing their due diligence. I studied his face, seeing the paranoia and desperation that had clearly been eating at him for years. His eyes darted around the room, like he expected hidden cameras or recording devices. This wasn't the confident, charismatic man who'd convinced me to trust him with everything I'd worked for. This was someone who'd been looking over his shoulder for so long that he'd forgotten how to stand up straight. You think I've been sabotaging your career? I know you have, and I understand why. What I did to you was wrong, Diana. I was young and stupid and scared, and I made a terrible mistake. A mistake. I stood up so fast that my chair rolled backward and hit the wall with a soft thud. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence. You forged my signature on a contract that gave you sole ownership of our company. You had me escorted out of my own office by security guards who looked at me like I was some kind of criminal. You told everyone in the industry that I was an unreliable partner who couldn't be trusted with important decisions. The memories came flooding back with a clarity that surprised me. I could still remember the humiliation of walking through that office lobby with a cardboard box of my personal belongings, while former colleagues avoided eye contact. I could still feel the sting of reading the press release that painted me as a junior partner who'd been bought out for personal reasons. You told reporters that I was having an emotional breakdown and that you were protecting the company's interests by removing me from leadership. I continued, my voice getting stronger with each word. You said I was too unstable to handle the pressure of a major acquisition. That wasn't a mistake, Marcus. That was character assassination. I was desperate. Marcus shot to his feet, his composure finally cracking like ice under pressure. My wife was pregnant with our second child. We had medical bills piling up from her difficult pregnancy, and the company was barely breaking even despite all our hard work. When that acquisition offer came in from Tech Global, I panicked. I thought if I could just get through the sale, I could pay you back later, and we could start fresh. With what money? You sold our company for $12 million and disappeared. I never saw a penny of what should have been my $6 million share, because I lost it all. Marcus was shouting now, tears streaming down his face in a way that would have embarrassed the man I used to know. The real estate investments that my financial advisor swore were sure things, the stock market crash of 2008 that wiped out half my portfolio, my wife's medical bills when the cancer came back worse than before. It was all gone within 3 years. I felt something cold settle in my chest, like ice water replacing my blood. Your wife had cancer? Ovarian cancer. Stage 4. She fought for 2 years before. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, leaving wet streaks on his cheeks. She died thinking I was a successful businessman who'd made smart choices to secure our family's future. She never knew what I'd done to you, what kind of man she'd married. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and Marcus's ragged breathing. I thought about Linda Hoffman, the sweet woman who used to bring us sandwiches and coffee when we worked late in the garage. She'd always treated me like family, asking about my parents and remembering my birthday. She'd been genuinely excited about the company we were building, proud of both of us for chasing our dreams. I'm sorry about Linda, I said quietly, and I meant it. Whatever Marcus had done to me, Linda had been innocent. Are you glad that karma finally caught up with me? The question hung in the air, like smoke from a fire that had been burning for 15 years. Was I glad? I'd spent so many years angry, so many nights lying awake planning what I'd say if I ever saw Marcus again. I'd imagined scenarios where I was successful and he was struggling, where I had the power and he was begging for scraps. But sitting here, looking at this broken man who'd lost everything that mattered to him, I felt something I hadn't expected. Disappointment. This wasn't the triumphant confrontation I'd imagined. This was just sad. Why are you really here, Marcus? There are thousands of tech companies in this city, hundreds of startups that would kill for someone with your experience. Why apply to mine? He looked down at his hands, studying them like they held answers to questions he'd been asking himself for months. Because I heard you were hiring senior developers, and despite everything that's happened between us, I'm still good at what I do. I know you have every reason to hate me, but I also know you're a fair woman. I was hoping you might give me a chance to prove I've changed. A chance. I walked around the table until I was standing directly in front of him, close enough to see the gray stubble on his chin and smell the desperation that clung to him like cheap cologne. You want me to give you a chance? After what you did to me? Yes. After you stole my company, ruined my reputation, and forced me to start over from nothing with no money, no connections, and no credibility? Yes. After you made me spend 5 years rebuilding my career, while you lived off the money that should have been mine, money that could have changed my entire life? Marcus met my eyes for the first time since he'd walked into the room, and I saw something there that surprised me. Not the arrogance or entitlement I'd expected, but genuine remorse mixed with the kind of desperation that comes from having nowhere else to turn. Yes, because despite everything I did to you, I know you're a better person than I am, and because I'm desperate enough to beg, if that's what it takes. I stared at him for a long moment, this man who'd once been my best friend, my partner, my brother in everything but blood. We'd stayed up countless nights debugging code together, sharing dreams about changing the world through technology. We'd celebrated our first major client with cheap champagne in plastic cups, promising each other that we'd always be partners no matter how big the company got. The man who'd taught me that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford in the business world. You're right about one thing, Marcus. I am hiring senior developers. Hope flickered in his eyes like a candle flame in the wind. But I'm not hiring you. The hope died instantly, replaced by the hollow look of a man who'd just lost his last chance at redemption. However, I continued, walking back to my chair and sitting down with deliberate calm. I am curious about something. You said I've been blacklisting you for 15 years, sabotaging your career, ruining your deals, spreading stories about your questionable business practices. You have been I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us. Marcus, I want you to call someone for me. Who? Anyone. Any potential employer, any investor, anyone in the tech industry who supposedly heard these stories about your questionable business practices. Marcus frowned, confusion replacing the despair on his face. Why? Because I want you to ask them where they heard those stories. I want you to find out who's been spreading rumors about you all these years. I don't understand. I smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. It was the kind of smile that had made competitors nervous in board meetings and caused hostile takeover attempts to fail. Marcus, I told you the truth when I said I haven't thought about you in years. I've been too busy building my empire to waste time on petty revenge. Then who? My office door opened, and my assistant Jennifer walked in with her usual efficient smile. Miss Chun, your 3 o'clock appointment is here. Should I send them in? Actually, yes. I think Marcus would be very interested to meet our next appointment. A woman walked into the conference room, tall and elegant, with silver hair pulled back in a sophisticated chignon. She was wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, and she moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. When she saw Marcus, her smile widened into something that was equal parts triumph and vindication. Marcus's face went white again, but this time it was with recognition, not shock. Hello, Marcus, she said, her voice warm and familiar despite the circumstances. Surprised to see me? It was Linda Hoffman, Marcus's supposedly dead wife, and she was very much alive. Marcus's coffee cup slipped from his trembling hands and shattered against the marble floor, sending dark liquid splashing across my expensive Italian shoes. The sound echoed through the conference room like a gunshot, but neither of us moved to clean it up. We were both too busy staring at the woman who was supposed to be 6 feet underground. Linda, Marcus's voice came out as barely a whisper. But you died. I buried you. I spoke at your funeral. Linda Hoffman, or whoever she was now, laughed, a sound like crystal bells that I remembered from our garage days when she'd bring us late-night snacks and tease us about working too hard. But there was something different about it now, something sharp and calculated that made my skin crawl. Oh, Marcus, you always were gullible. She walked further into the room, her heels clicking against the floor with military precision. Did you really think I'd waste away from cancer while you spent our money on poker games and stock tips from your drinking buddies? I watched this reunion unfold with the fascination of someone witnessing a car accident in slow motion. Linda looked nothing like the frail, dying woman Marcus had described. Her skin glowed with health. Her silver hair was styled perfectly, and she moved with the confidence of someone who'd been planning this moment for years. I don't understand, Marcus said, sinking back into his chair like his legs couldn't support him anymore. The doctor said you had 6 months to live. I saw the medical reports. You saw what I wanted you to see. Linda pulled out a chair and sat down across from him, her movements graceful and deliberate. Amazing what you can accomplish with a good forger and a few $1,000s in the right pockets. The pieces started clicking together in my mind like a puzzle solving itself. You faked your own death. Brilliant deduction, Diana. I can see why your company is so successful. Linda turned to me with genuine warmth in her eyes. I've been following your career. Very impressive what you've built from nothing. From nothing? Marcus looked between us with growing confusion. What are you talking about? Diana had her share of the company when I bought her out. Linda and I exchanged a look that was part amusement, part pity. Marcus, Linda said gently, Diana never got a penny from the sale of your company. You stole everything from her, remember? That's not true. I sent her a check for her share minus the legal fees. And you sent her a check for $50,000. Linda interrupted. out of a $12 million sale. And then you had your lawyer claim she'd agreed to the reduced amount because of her emotional instability. I watched Marcus's face as the memory came back to him, seeing the exact moment when he realized he couldn't lie his way out of this anymore. His shoulders sagged like someone had cut the strings, holding him upright. I was going to pay her back, he said weakly. Once the investments paid off, I was going to make it right. With what money? Linda's voice was getting colder with each word. The money you lost in Vegas? The money you spent on that ridiculous sports car? The money you gave to that con artist who convinced you to invest in his revolutionary cryptocurrency? I leaned forward, suddenly very interested in this conversation. Cryptocurrency? Oh yes, Linda said, turning back to me. Marcus didn't just lose the money from your company's sale. He lost everything we had, including my inheritance from my parents and the life insurance money from my death. Wait, I said, holding up a hand. You collected life insurance money on your own fake death. $2 million, Linda said proudly. Marcus was the beneficiary, of course. I thought it might teach him a lesson about the value of money, but instead he managed to lose that too. Marcus was staring at his wife like she was a stranger. You've been alive this whole time, watching me struggle, watching me lose everything, and you never said a word. I said plenty of words. You just weren't listening. Linda opened her purse and pulled out a thick manila folder. I tried to stop you from making bad investments. I tried to get you to seek help for your gambling addiction. I tried to convince you to pay Diana back what you owed her. She spread the contents of the folder across the table. Bank statements, investment records, casino receipts, and what looked like surveillance photos of Marcus at various poker games and racetracks. When you wouldn't listen to reason, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I picked up one of the surveillance photos, studying Marcus's face as he sat at a blackjack table with a pile of chips in front of him. The timestamp showed it was taken just 3 months ago. You've been having him followed. For years, Linda confirmed. I needed to document his gambling addiction for the divorce proceedings. But I also needed to make sure he didn't hurt anyone else the way he hurt you. Marcus was flipping through the bank statements with shaking hands. These are my accounts. How did you get access to my financial records? I never changed my name back after the divorce, Marcus. Legally, I'm still Linda Hoffman. It's amazing how helpful bank employees can be when a grieving widow needs to access her late husband's accounts to settle his estate. Divorce? I asked. But if you're legally dead... I'm not legally dead, Linda said with a smile. I'm legally divorced. The death certificate was filed in a different state under a slightly different name. Linda Marie Hoffman died of cancer in Oregon. Linda M. Hoffman divorced her gambling addict husband in Nevada and moved to California to start a new life. The elegance of it was breathtaking. She'd managed to fake her death, collect insurance money, divorce her husband, and disappear, all while staying close enough to monitor his activities and protect his potential victims. You're the one who's been sabotaging my career, Marcus said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. All those deals that fell through, all those investors who suddenly lost interest. That was you. That was me protecting people from making the same mistake Diana made when she trusted you. Linda's voice was matter-of-fact, like she was discussing the weather. Every time he got close to securing funding for a new venture, I made sure the investors knew about your history of forging documents and stealing from partners. But how did you know about my business dealings? Linda pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. I've been your silent partner for years, Marcus. Every company you've tried to start, every investor you've pitched to, every contract you've negotiated. I've been watching, waiting for you to try to hurt someone else the way you hurt Diana. I stared at the phone, seeing what looked like a comprehensive database of Marcus's business activities. Email chains, meeting notes, financial projections, even recordings of phone calls. This is incredible. I said, you've been running a one-woman investigation into your own husband, ex-husband. Linda corrected. And yes, it's been quite the project. But someone had to make sure he didn't destroy any more lives. Marcus was looking at his wife, ex-wife, like he was seeing her for the first time. Why didn't you just turn me in to the police? If you had evidence that I forged Diana's signature, because the statute of limitations had run out, I said, understanding dawning on me. By the time Linda could have come forward with evidence, it was too late to prosecute. Exactly. But it wasn't too late to make sure you faced consequences for your actions. Linda stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. I've spent the last 15 years making sure that every time you tried to cheat someone, every time you tried to take advantage of a partner's trust, there were consequences. You destroyed my life, Marcus said, his voice hollow. No, Marcus, you destroyed your own life. I just made sure you couldn't destroy anyone else's. The room fell silent, except for the distant hum of traffic 40 floors below. I found myself looking at Linda with a mixture of admiration and horror. What she'd done was elaborate, methodical, and completely illegal. It was also, in its own twisted way, brilliant. So what happens now? I asked. Linda turned back to us with a smile that was both sad and satisfied. Now Marcus learns what it's like to face the consequences of his actions without being able to run away or start over somewhere else. I don't understand. Diana, you said you weren't going to hire Marcus. But what if I told you there was a way he could work off the debt he owes you? A way for him to make amends for what he stole? I felt a chill run down my spine. What kind of way? Linda reached into her purse and pulled out another folder, this one even thicker than the first. Marcus isn't the only person in the tech industry who's been stealing from partners and cheating investors. I've been documenting cases for years, building files on dozens of people who've gotten away with fraud because their victims were too scared or too broke to fight back. She set the folder on the table between us. Your company has the resources and the reputation to take on these cases. Marcus has the inside knowledge of how these scams work. Together, you could help a lot of people get justice. I opened the folder and started reading. Case after case of partnership fraud, stolen intellectual property, forged contracts, and financial manipulation. Each file was meticulously documented with evidence that would hold up in court. This is a full-time job, I said. Yes, it is. And Marcus is going to do it for free until he's paid back every penny he owes you, plus interest. Marcus was staring at the folder like it contained his own death warrant. You want me to help prosecute people for doing the same things I did. I want you to help their victims get justice. Linda said firmly. The same justice Diana never got. And if I refuse? Linda's smile turned cold. Then I release all the evidence I've gathered about your activities to the FBI, the SEC, and every major tech publication in the country. Your gambling addiction, your history of fraud, your pattern of stealing from partners. All of it. You destroy me. Marcus, you're already destroyed. This is your chance to build something meaningful from the wreckage. I looked at the folder again, thinking about all the victims whose stories were documented inside. People like me who'd trusted the wrong person and lost everything. People who'd never gotten justice because the system was designed to protect the powerful and punish the vulnerable. There's one condition, I said. Both Marcus and Linda looked at me. If Marcus is going to work for my company, he's going to do it properly. Full background check, psychological evaluation, supervised probation. And he's going to attend gamblers' anonymous meetings twice a week. Diana, Marcus started. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Marcus looked at his ex-wife, then at me, then at the folder full of evidence that could either redeem him or destroy him completely. I'll take them. Linda smiled, but there was something in her expression that made me nervous. Wonderful. There's just one more thing you both should know. What? Marcus isn't the only person I've been investigating. She pulled out her phone and showed us a photo that made my blood run cold. It was me sitting in a restaurant with a man I recognized as the CEO of one of our biggest competitors. The timestamp showed it was from last month. Diana, did you really think I wouldn't notice that you've been selling confidential client information to Tech Global Industries? The room started spinning around me. That's not what that was. Really? Because I have recordings of your conversations, copies of the documents you passed along, and bank records showing the payments you received. I felt like I was going to be sick. Linda, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been doing to your clients exactly what Marcus did to you. The only difference is that you've been more careful about covering your tracks. Marcus was staring at me with a mixture of shock and something that might have been relief. You're just as bad as I am. No, I said quickly. It's not the same thing. I was gathering intelligence on a competitor who was trying to steal our clients. I never sold anything that would actually hurt. You sold client data. Linda interrupted. You violated confidentiality agreements. You committed corporate espionage. The only reason you haven't been caught is because Tech Global has been protecting you. The folder in front of me suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. All those victims of fraud and theft. And I was just another perpetrator. What do you want? I asked quietly. Linda's smile was triumphant. I want justice. For everyone. She stood up and walked toward the door, then turned back to look at us. You have 24 hours to decide. Either you both work together to help the victims in those files get justice, or I release everything I have on both of you to the authorities. And if we agree to help, then maybe, just maybe, you'll both learn what it feels like to do the right thing for once in your lives. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Marcus and me alone with the wreckage of our carefully constructed lies. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over the city, and I had the feeling that the real tempest was just beginning. The next 24 hours felt like the longest day of my life. I sat in my office until 3 a.m, going through Linda's files and trying to figure out how she'd managed to gather so much evidence on so many people. The scope of her investigation was staggering. She hadn't just been watching Marcus and me. She'd been building cases against dozens of tech executives, venture capitalists, and startup founders who'd been stealing, cheating, and defrauding their way to success. By dawn, I'd made my decision. Marcus was already waiting in the conference room when I arrived at 7 a.m., looking like he hadn't slept either. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were wrinkled, and he had the hollow-eyed look of a man who'd spent the night staring at his own reflection and not liking what he saw. I've been thinking about what Linda said. He began as I sat down across from him. So have I. I set a fresh cup of coffee in front of him, a small gesture that felt enormous given our history. Marcus, I need to tell you something about those meetings with Tech Global. He looked up from his coffee. Waiting. Linda was right. I was selling client information, but not for money. I pulled out my laptop and opened a file I'd been working on all night. I was trying to build a case against their CEO, Richard Blackstone. He's been systematically destroying smaller companies by stealing their technology and then burying them in lawsuits they can't afford to fight. Marcus frowned. I don't understand. 3 years ago, Blackstone targeted one of my clients, a small AI startup run by a brilliant woman named Sarah Kim. He offered to acquire her company, and when she refused, he stole her core algorithm and launched a competing product. Sarah tried to sue, but Blackstone's legal team buried her in paperwork until she ran out of money. I turned the laptop around so Marcus could see the screen. It was filled with emails, financial records, and legal documents that painted a picture of systematic corporate predation. Sarah committed suicide 6 months later. She left a note saying she couldn't live with the knowledge that her life's work had been stolen and there was nothing she could do about it. Marcus's face went pale. Diana, I'm sorry. I had no idea. I've been gathering evidence against Blackstone ever since. The meetings Linda photographed were me pretending to sell him information while actually documenting his illegal activities. I was planning to turn everything over to the FBI once I had enough evidence to guarantee a conviction. Why didn't you just tell Linda that? Because I wasn't sure she'd believe me, and because I hesitated, then decided to tell him the truth. Because part of me was enjoying watching her think she had something on me. After 15 years of feeling powerless, it felt good to have a secret that could protect me. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying the evidence on my laptop screen. In a weird way, we're all doing the same thing. What do you mean? You're trying to get justice for Sarah Kim. Linda's trying to get justice for you. I'm trying to get justice for everyone I've heard over the years. He looked up at me with something that might have been hope. Maybe we can actually make this work. Before I could respond, the conference room door opened, and Linda walked in looking as composed and elegant as she had the day before. She was carrying a briefcase and wearing a different designer suit, this one in charcoal gray that made her silver hair look like spun platinum. "Good morning," she said, setting her briefcase on the table. "I trust you've both had time to consider my proposal?" "We have," I said, "and we're in. But I have some conditions of my own." Linda raised an eyebrow, such as, "First, Marcus and I want full transparency about your investigation. We need to know how you gathered this evidence and whether any of it was obtained illegally." "Fair enough." "Second, we want to expand the scope beyond just tech industry fraud. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. Corporate fraud, investment scams, partnership theft, all of it." "Agreed." "And third," I said, looking directly at Linda, "we want you to join the team officially, not as a silent partner or a blackmailer, but as a legitimate investigator working with proper legal oversight." Linda's composure slipped for just a moment, and I saw something vulnerable flash across her face. "You want me to work for you?" "I want you to work with us. You've spent 15 years building cases in the shadows. It's time to bring them into the light." Marcus leaned forward. "Diana's right. What you've done is incredible, but it's also illegal. If we're going to help these victims get real justice, we need to do it through proper channels." Linda opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick legal document. "As it happens, I've already taken care of that." She slid the document across the table to me. It was a partnership agreement for a new division of Chun Digital Solutions, something called the Corporate Justice Initiative. "I had my lawyers draw this up last night." Linda said, "It establishes a formal investigative unit within your company with proper licensing and legal oversight. I've also arranged for cooperation agreements with the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division and the SEC's Enforcement Bureau." I stared at the document, amazed by the thoroughness of her preparation. "You've been planning this for months." "Years, actually. I've been waiting for the right moment to bring everything together." Linda's smile was genuine now, without the calculating edge I'd seen before. "I needed Marcus to hit rock bottom, so he'd be willing to change. I needed you to be successful enough to have the resources to make a real difference. And I needed enough evidence to make the whole thing worthwhile." Marcus was reading over my shoulder, his eyes widening as he saw the scope of what Linda had planned. "This is incredible. You're talking about taking on some of the biggest names in Silicon Valley." "Yes, I am. And we're going to win." Linda pulled out another folder. this one labeled with Richard Blackstone's name. Diana, I know about your investigation into Tech Global. I also know that you've been working alone, and that Blackstone is getting suspicious. She opened the folder to reveal surveillance photos of me meeting with various Tech Global employees, along with what looked like intercepted communications. Blackstone knows you're building a case against him. He's planning to have you arrested for corporate espionage before you can turn your evidence over to the authorities. My blood went cold when, tomorrow morning, he's already filed a complaint with the FBI claiming that you've been stealing trade secrets and selling them to foreign competitors. But that's not true. It doesn't matter. He has enough fabricated evidence to get you arrested and your company's assets frozen while they investigate. By the time you're cleared, he'll have destroyed all the evidence of his own crimes and bankrupted you with legal fees. Marcus grabbed my arm. Diana, we have to do something. We are going to do something, Linda said calmly. We're going to beat him to the punch. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Agent Morrison, this is Linda Hoffman. I'm ready to turn over that evidence we discussed. Yes, all of it. This afternoon would be perfect. She hung up and looked at us with satisfaction. Agent Morrison has been waiting for someone to come forward with evidence against Blackstone for 3 years. He's going to be very interested in what we have to show him. What about the charges against Diana? Marcus asked, what charges? By the time Blackstone tries to file his complaint tomorrow, he'll be in federal custody facing charges of corporate espionage, fraud, and conspiracy. His credibility will be somewhat diminished. I felt like I was in a dream. You've thought of everything. I've had a lot of time to plan. Linda stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city, where so many people had been hurt by the kind of fraud we were about to expose. Diana, 15 years ago, Marcus stole your company and your future. But in a way, he also gave you something. What's that? He gave you the motivation to build something better, something that could actually make a difference. She turned back to us with tears in her eyes. Your company has the resources, the reputation, and the legal standing to take on cases that individual victims could never pursue on their own. Marcus was staring at the partnership agreement with something that looked like wonder. You're giving us a chance to be the good guys. I'm giving you a chance to earn redemption. Linda corrected, both of you. But it's going to take years of hard work, and there's no guarantee that the people you've hurt will ever forgive you. I know, I said quietly, but it's better than living with the guilt. And it's better than spending the rest of my life running from my mistakes, Marcus added. Linda smiled, and for the first time since she'd walked back into our lives, it looked completely genuine. Then let's get to work. 6 months later, I stood on the stage at the annual Tech Ethics Conference, looking out at an audience of entrepreneurs, investors, and journalists who'd come to hear about the Corporate Justice Initiative's first major victory. Richard Blackstone was serving a 15-year sentence for fraud and conspiracy. Tech Global had been broken up, and its stolen assets returned to their rightful owners. And Sarah Kim's family had received a settlement that would ensure her children could attend any college they wanted. The Corporate Justice Initiative has recovered over $50 million for fraud victims in its first 6 months of operation, I said into the microphone. But more importantly, we've sent a message to the tech industry that there are consequences for betraying the trust of partners, employees, and investors. In the audience, I could see Marcus sitting in the front row, taking notes for the case he was working on, a partnership fraud that had destroyed a promising biotech startup. Next to him sat Linda, who'd become our head of investigations and had proven to be as brilliant at building legal cases as she'd been at conducting shadow operations. The initiative is always looking for new cases. I continued. If you've been the victim of corporate fraud, partnership theft, or investment scams, we want to help you get justice. After my speech, Marcus found me backstage. Great presentation, he said. I think we're going to get a lot of new cases from this. Good. The more people we can help, the better. I looked at him, still amazed by how much he'd changed in just 6 months. The desperate, broken man who'd walked into my conference room was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to have found purpose in helping others avoid the mistakes he'd made. Diana, I know I can never fully make up for what I did to you, but I want you to know that working with the initiative has been the most meaningful thing I've ever done. I know. And Marcus, I forgive you. The words surprised both of us. I hadn't planned to say them, but as soon as they were out, I knew they were true. You do. I do. Not because you've earned it, but because holding on to that anger was poisoning my life. I spent 15 years building a successful company, but I was never really happy because I was always carrying that resentment around. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still owe me $6 million plus interest. He laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him, since we were young and stupid and thought we could change the world with nothing but code and determination. At the rate I'm going, it'll take me about 30 years to pay that back. Then I guess we're going to be working together for a long time. Linda appeared beside us, holding a tablet with what looked like a new case file. Sorry to interrupt, but we just got a call from a whistleblower at Meridian Ventures. Apparently, they've been running a Ponzi scheme disguised as a tech incubator. I looked at the file, then at Marcus, then at Linda, 3 people who'd been brought together by betrayal and fraud, now working to make sure others didn't suffer the same fate. How many victims? I asked. 47 companies, total losses estimated at over $100 million. Marcus whistled low. That's going to be a big case. The biggest one yet. Linda agreed. Are you ready? I thought about Sarah Kim, about all the other victims whose stories were documented in Linda's files, about the people who were still out there suffering in silence because they thought there was no justice for what had been done to them. We're ready. Outside the conference center, rain was beginning to fall, washing the city clean and making everything look fresh and new. I thought about the garage where Marcus and I had started our first company, about the dreams we'd shared and the trust we'd broken, and the long, complicated path that had brought us back together. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's building something better from the wreckage of what came before. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to turn your greatest failure into your most meaningful success. The Corporate Justice Initiative had a lot of work ahead of us, but for the first time in 15 years, I was looking forward to tomorrow.